Welcome to the Data Leadership Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony J. Algman. Data is everywhere in our businesses, and it takes leadership to make the most of it. We bring you the people, stories, and lessons to help you become a data leader. Today, we welcome Telmo Silva. Telmo has spent more than 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry and is specialized in information systems for large manufacturing and pharmaceutical groups. In 2008, he created ClickPharma, later renamed to ClickData, with the sole intent of making data management and reporting accessible to every company. And I'm excited to have him here today. Telmo, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Anthony. This is great.
So why don't we just get started? I gave a very quick, brief intro for you, but why don't we start by just give us a little bit more background on your career and the inspiration behind ClickData, and now an organization that has continued to thrive and grow over the last well over a decade now. Help us understand where that fits into the marketplace, and we'll kind of just launch it off from there.
It sounds good. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so my career started mostly in consulting, dealing with as you mentioned in the intro, manufacturing, retail, and then pharmaceutical. Pharmaceutical industry specifically has been a very interesting and very difficult industry, because unlike manufacturing or retail or food or you don't know who your end customer is, right? There's a high level of protection in many different spots on the chain of selling a product to the customer. And then there's a lot of possibility for replacement of products. The pharmacist can exchange and change the prescriptions based on generics, etc. Then there's the insurance companies, and then we have the regional aspect of things, the differences between the healthcare systems in the different countries and so forth. And that is a very challenging industry kind of to wrap your head. And data is obviously core to that, right? Mm-hmm. Pharmaceutical industry is definitely has an impact in terms of the research and development money that they put into a drug, and then they need to see that out. So how do you handle that, both from a technology point of view, but also from a process and even a governmental point of view? So mm-hmm. it gave me a lot of the background when I start dealing with these different customers that there's something to be done here. And in fact, when I started, I was not at all thinking, oh, it's data, I want to get into the world of data. All I was doing is doing what most IT consultants do, which is implementing financial systems, ERPs, the big names, SAP, etc., implementing CRMs. At the time was Siebel. We were shifting the mindset from a Salesforce tool to a CRM, a customer-centric tool, and then Salesforce and so forth. So I was dealing with that, and then it kind of dawned on me that we always start from the bottom, from the transactional side of things. We always start from let's buy a system that does invoicing. Let's buy a system that does purchase orders. Let's buy a system that does HR, CRM, and so forth. And let's worry about reporting later, right? Let's figure it out how we're going to collect that later. And that's where, data warehouse projects come in, data marts, data lakes, big data, small data, data cleansing, master data management, all those things kind of, it was like a problem in search of a solution kind of thing, because we've created this. Mm-hmm. And, I was fortunate enough to work with my bosses were very knowledgeable in that respect. And they pushed me towards thinking, what I'm looking for is this is how I see it from the management, and that should escalate down. Mm-hmm. And in that, all that experience gave me kind of that feeling that something is not done yet. Yeah. Something is not complete in the IT tool set that companies use these days. I think SAP and other tools have done amazing jobs in completing the transactional side of things, Oracle, etc., Microsoft as well. But when it comes to BI, it's still kind of a very fuzzy field, and data in specific, and information systems, right? Mm-hmm. And that's really where my passion kind of led me into, is in solving these data problems for the pharmaceutical industry. How could I solve these problems for everybody? Yeah. And why does it take so long, and why is it so costly? Mm-hmm. And that really is kind of what led me in 2008 to create ClickPharma initially to
Mhm.
solve this for pharma, and see how far I could get on that. And yeah, so that's kind of the part one of the story was my my corporate career and consulting
Mhm.
that kind of led me to become an entrepreneur, a technologist, if you will, of a software development company,
Mhm.
and all the lessons that go alongside with it.
So, and let's talk a little bit more about what ClickData is and how it works, because when I think about businesses in the data industry, so you when you talk ClickData, there's different kinds of data business. Right? There's businesses that compile data and sell that data. There's businesses that help organizations through tooling or consulting to refine their own data. There's you kind of name anything under the sun, it could be there. So what does ClickData focus in, and has that changed over the years at all?
I think it has, and I think first we need to analyze what we call, the BI and the information system market, the
Mhm.
data viz market, and so forth. Right?
Mhm.
We need to put that into perspective and see what do we believe is the right tool for the job. What do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? Right?
Mhm.
So what we needed to accomplish, what my objective was, to give the power for any size company, large or small, to be able to collect data from their own systems, the
Mhm.
systems that they're using to run their business, and putting it all together in a place, a playground where they could build these metrics.
Mhm.
Um, because interesting enough, is much harder to sit those people down and say, what do you want? And collect all their requirements, and then go out, because that's the traditional way we do things. We
Yeah.
collect functional requirements. We go around saying, okay, manager of this department, what would you like to see? Okay, what would your people would like to see? Collect all that, put that into technical documents, and then implement it. But that is very difficult. And even if we do that, by the end, what I found in both in my consulting side, but also working for large pharma, was 3 months later, you go down to the same people that you just discussed, and those requirements would have changed,
Mhm.
not because of them necessarily, but market changes. Market is dynamic, even in an industry as regulated and seemingly as static as pharma is. It does change. There's competitors that come and go. There's new products. There's impacts of government, laws and regulatory affairs that impact the way they do business, and as such, that is something that we need to adapt faster. So in that frustration of going back there and seeing these people still exporting their data to Excel because the requirements that we collected and implemented over the last 3, 4, 5 months no longer fit their needs, was the frustration that led me to believe that I need a different tool.
Mhm.
But what is that tool? Is it a data viz tool like Tableaus and ClickViews, or
Mhm.
is it a data warehouse like an Oracle Business Intelligence, or even SAP ANA or something like that, or is it the business rules that we put into the ETLs, and making all those links between the data and the different KPIs, and the calculations that we, what is that? And the answer is, it's everything. In fact, it's not one thing.
Right.
It's um, and that itself was a huge kind of, oh my, do I really want to do this? Do I want to now create a company that basically not only competes with the Tableaus and ClickViews of this world and Power BIs, but it's also competing with the Oracles and the IBM data warehouses, and it's also competing with the Informaticas and the Talons of this world? What are you trying to do, Telmo? Like, are you trying to? Do you really think you can do this? And the essence is, yeah. I mean, I think we could. I
Mhm.
think that the biggest differentiator, what we wanted to build, was a tool that a small business could implement and have a full-fledged data warehouse with their own data, that they could do calculations and massage the data and produce visuals that allow them to manage their business. Because at the end of the day, that's all that a manager wants, is to
Mhm.
say, how am I doing? Am I doing well? Am I going in the right direction? Do I need to shift?
Mhm.
Or do I need to do something or not? Everything is working well. Let me take the week off. That's all they really want sometimes, right?
Mhm.
And as much as I love Excel and some of those other tools that I mentioned, um, the automation that goes along with it is also part of it. We need to make sure this thing is embedded in the business so that it becomes core to the business, right? So that is what ClickData really initially ClickPharma was, and later ClickData was set out to be. Is a full set of data warehouse, connectivity, data visualization, data transformation, publication, all in one package, and data lineage, something that I know where this data come from and I know where it ends, is built in, baked into the product, as opposed to the other players.
Well, and you addressed that, you did this with the mindset of being able to serve, I imagine businesses of a wide range of sizes, but even small businesses. And what I think is so important about the way you were talking about and the way you've created ClickData is that so many of our tools out there handle this one little sliver of the overall value proposition, the life cycle, or the stream of activities that need to happen for us to actually capitalize on that data. And that's something like when I talk about like data leadership topics and things like that, it all comes back to this. It's like, recognize we have data, and the best data, like to your point, the best data about our business to help our business is from our business. And that's like the stuff that we really care about deeply, and bringing it together alongside from whatever systems it's coming from, bringing it together and analyzing it and delivering it to people who can act on it is a wide array of functions. Like there's a lot of technical complexity in going through all of those steps. But if you can take it and look at it end to end to say, okay, what are our potential in this data? How can we move it through a series of processes to deliver it to somebody who can run a business better? That's a good story. And I think that the smaller the company gets, while their available data is arguably less than a very large organization, it's not that much less. It's still probably way more complex on a per capita basis than it is in many large organizations. These problems are very, very similar, and they scale slower as you get to smaller organizations to large organizations. Then the need for those scales with it, because small businesses need data insights and actions just as much as large organizations. They just have less money to invest in making happen. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the challenge, as you said, the challenge of the larger organizations is the volume of data, right? But not necessarily the complexity. And I think part of the culprit, if you will, is the cloud, right? These software as a service, much like ClickData is, that have generated this need. Whereas before you'd look at a solution, if you're a small size, medium business, you'd look at Microsoft Access and some Excel macros, and maybe you put QuickBooks installed on your laptop, and you have your financial system. Where these days the choices are much, much wider, and they're all on cloud. And now you no longer have direct access to that data. That data sits now in QuickBooks Online and all these different online solutions, Salesforce and all this. And now the small medium business has a different problem. Is, okay, how do I get to my data other than just exporting it out every Monday morning, right? So now you get into API discussions. How do I use an API to get to my data? So all that has been compounded, I think, greatly by the spur of if we look back to 2005 onwards, the last 15 years, where the small business, any small business, and I look even ClickData today as not a large business. We use over 12 different cloud-based systems, from development to financials. So the complexity now is different, right? But I totally agree with you in the sense that small businesses, a P&L statement is a P&L statement, regardless of what company size you are. It's just how difficult it is to go get that data and how much volume you have of that data.
Right. And so, like, I like the accounting example. That's something that businesses of all kinds can relate to. We all have to do accounting one way or another. And, back in the olden days, we had our journals that had the like handwritten, accounting entries long ago, did away with those. Everybody's been using software for a long time. A lot of it was, client side software that just existed on your laptop or your desktop. Oftentimes could create exports or what have you. And now we've elevated it out to, I think a lot of small organizations especially are fully in the cloud with a QuickBooks Online or what have you. And the question that I have, and using that maybe as the initial example, like, have things, like, we know the cloud has more power, like we get that, but at the end of the day, in terms of making it are we making it easier or harder by being in the cloud with all of these different services? Has it actually gotten better, or are we actually losing ground compared to how it used to be? What's your take on that?
I think my take is that I think it has been easier um, for the end user to get new features, for the development company to deliver new features as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you take this back into a decentralized model where, and it's funny to see along the history of kind of um, client server architectures, 3-tier models, 4-tier models, etc., how we go back and forth, right? There were
Absolutely.
mainframes back then, and then everybody said no, everybody on Windows, and everybody goes, oh no, everybody back centralized on the cloud, and it goes in cycles. But nonetheless, it's I do believe that, and speaking personally, that I would never be able to deliver such a powerful system as ClickData if it was not a multi-tenant single installation for everybody to use. And when my engineers finish the work, that all the features are available instantly for all my customers. If as opposed to that, I would have to deliver that through the installations on each system or network. The cost would change, the delivery rate would definitely change, etc. Where we have lost is now that we've moved the data from local to cloud, we've lost a little bit of that access to that data, right? And I think that is part of the reason why ClickData is here today, is to try to solve that problem, is to enable the folks that don't know what an API is, or a GraphQL, or how do I measure my Google Analytics, but I want it in a different way, the reporting, or I want my Facebook social media stats. How do I get them delivered to me in a different format or mingled with my sales data? Well, I don't know API, I don't know coding. How do I do that? So using ClickData and tools like ClickData to easily go get the data and kind of create a closer pool of data that they can use, whether you want to call that a data warehouse or just a copy of your cloud data. But yeah, I do agree with you. There's trade-offs as with everything, and I'm sure we're going to see another cycle somewhere, and we already start seeing some hints of that with container technology like Docker and things like that, where we went from kind of the infrastructure as a service to platform as a service, and now everybody is trying to containerize things and to put them back into smaller modules again. So we're on that spiral, on that curve again of decentralization potentially. We see Amazons and clouds and Googles offering hybrid cloud solutions, so they're half on each side. So I mean, there's always that push there, that pull back and forth, and I think that's something that will continue to happen. But I do think that in terms of functionality, delivery, and cost as well, we are now, and again, we need to consider that we have also been imposed some of these things by other than technology. For example, accountability, financial accountability, SOC compliance, SOC compliance, HIPAA compliance, all these GDPR, etc. All these things are forcing us as well to be more concerned about data security, about data backups, and it's not everybody that can run their business, and their laptop gets stolen or broken or on a fire, and all of a sudden their entire data goes away. So it has been enforced as well to implement larger scale systems, which I don't think small and medium businesses are in measure to do so. So the cloud does have its pros, but I do agree with you. We did distance the business from the data.
Yeah, well, and I think a little bit about, like, because we have all of these capabilities now in the cloud that we just wouldn't be able to do any other way. And on one hand, you could say, well, that would naturally lead to these complexities from the implementation and integration standpoint. Once we want to get things talking to one another, I think that's where the increased reliance on APIs and containerization is, I think, coming from that symptom of we need to reduce the complexity in more kind of hyper evolving areas, because we still need to have that kind of consistent thread through all of those things in the life cycle. And so I think that's interesting, and I want to learn more. You mentioned something briefly, and I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more deeply about it, because like if I'm a smaller medium-sized business, and I think this story, like these challenges are easily identifiable for many folks. Even if you're not in a technology business fundamentally, you care about this stuff now. You care about these things. And we'll get into this whole notion of, there are so many things that are interesting but not impactful. There's all of these risks. It's kind of a data literacy question, but I don't want to talk about that just yet. What I want to talk about is when I'm trying to solve and understand how to build this kind of data ecosystem to drive my company, especially for small organizations, I think is especially interesting. Why don't I want to just go and hire an individual data consultant that will custom make that bespoke suit for us and exactly what my company wants and needs right now, connect my QuickBooks to the, my dashboard of choice, to my cloud of choice and all of that, versus having something that has maybe more capability broadly, but isn't as custom made for me. Like, what are the pros and cons, and why would somebody want to ClickData versus other options in the marketplace?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges, a challenge that we ourselves face, is that when you connect to as many systems as we do, but again, assuming a small and medium-sized business has only 3 or 4 APIs to deal with, the rate that the technology and the way that they offer you that data changes almost constantly. And I'm going to give you a very potentially the most complex example that we're faced with: Facebook data.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook ads, Instagram, just those 3 alone for any e-marketing or marketing company, agency, PR agency, those are critical, right? Mm-hmm. But even for a small, medium-sized business that uses those channels to promote B2C products, those are incredible channels, and they need to monitor those to make sure their investment is proper. But here's what happens. As with any popular systems, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it, as their data grows, their need to monetize that data grows. And the development that they do on their site can impact the way you get the data. So where one day, for example, you are able to get the last years of Facebook likes that you've had on your page, they may now only reduce that to 30 days. So now how can you do analysis over time? You need to consistently store that data somewhere in a trickle fashion to have the whole history of that. Where before they had version 1 of the API, now they have version 2. When we were using SOAP, now they're using REST. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow they're going to use GraphQL. So when you hire that developer to do that API, I believe you will need to hire that developer full time, basically, mm-hmm. because the changes are constant, if not monthly, mm-hmm. To either the API itself, the structure, the technical portion, but also what the data and how the data is structured and how they give it to you for free, mm-hmm. right? So, when we started the business, this is kind of a funny story. We're looking for investors, and I showed, I was explaining ClickData to the investors, and one of the investors told me, well, APIs is going to solve that. I don't think we need a centralized cloud data warehouse anymore. Mm-hmm. Everybody's doing APIs. And of course, if you have dealt with APIs, you know that not one API is built alike. It's not a standard. It's not it's not an email that you send to one and you get it and everybody knows what an email is. It's definitely not a standard. And the variations and implementations of it are tremendous. The limitations, the pagination. So all these complexities are fairly, even as a consultant basis, for you to get those in would be quite costly for you. Mm-hmm. But even if you did, ultimately the question that I've asked some of my bosses as I was working for the pharmaceutical industry, and they were just throwing more money into these global data warehouses is, but are we a pharmaceutical company or are we an IT company? Because at this point in time, I think I have more budget, in my department than, the medical research unit over there has, and that doesn't make sense to me. You need to focus on the core business. Our business is to sell medicine. And this is what I tell a lot of the small, medium-sized business. Your business is to do whatever you do best, not to be dealing with APIs and hiring consultants and things to implement, IT systems for you, right? If cloud really is to meet its promise of ease to use, fast adoption, better features at a lower cost, then it has to meet the whole thing. It can't be just the one piece and then leave the data reporting and analytics for later, and that is going to cost you a bundle, right? It's got to be the whole thing. So yeah, that's kind of the trade-off. But I do agree with you. If you do have a product, however, my only exception to that rule is if you do yourself, you are an IT shop, your business is being in software, then I do recommend you that you do build it and bake it into your own product, right? Don't do this if your core product is not that, but definitely look for a solution, if not ClicData, something else that makes your job easier, unless, again, you're a software shop.
There was an example that you gave in that I want to go back to just for a second to just reinforce for the listeners, the audience out there. And that is, you talked about how, Facebook, for example, could be providing, historically a year's worth of click information, and then they may reduce it down to 30 days. In a context where you're taking on the responsibility for yourself to have your API connections or do your analytics, can you imagine how easy it would be to miss that somehow, and then all of a sudden what were great numbers looking back a year have now dropped precipitously because you didn't realize now it's only a 30-day trail instead of a year trail, and you start to actually base organizational decisions on that? I mean, it's terrifying, and I can promise you all that's happening all over the place. Like, these are things that are happening daily in organizations, and we are running our businesses based on poor quality information, not due to any ill intent, and not even due to bad design and development up front. It's because the world changes around us, and if we do not adapt to it, we end up in this skewed version of reality. And I think it's just a really easy to understand example of how that can happen despite everybody at any given moment doing pretty much the right thing.
Absolutely. I mean, the Facebook, and again, not to hammer on them, but they did that in response, and that has happened to us in response, for example, of the Cambridge Analytics incident, where there was data leakage from Facebook through a third-party company, and all of a sudden they just said, well, we have to protect our company, we have to protect our users of Facebook, so we're cutting everybody's API access, and everybody needs to reauthorize and go through the whole approval process. So us, much like all the other Facebook partners, had to do this for our customers, so they can go back to getting their own data. So as you said, it's a perfectly great example where it was imposed on them to protect our own data, right? Where it gets a little bit more gray area for me is when they start wanting to, when they're cutting the data access of our own data for the sake of monetization. That is, it's starting to, why am I able to get conversions of this, but I can't get conversions of that? Why can I get 30 days of this, but that one I can get 60 days? And why does that other person can get 90 days? Oh, they're paying more. Okay, so it's that's going to be an interesting topic to follow in the next few years. Is why are we allowing these businesses to monetize on the data that we're actually providing to them, and how can we get some of that back as well, potentially?
That's interesting, because I mean, this is something that's been developing over as long as we've had data and cloud and all of that. And thinking about new kinds of data monetization strategies, I've seen prior clients that had strategies around, they had a big group of clients in a particular industry, and they would sell aggregations of all their other client information for a high cost, and they would obfuscate through aggregation any identifiable characteristics, but they could start to do industry relevant things based on a purely owned set of data that they had a unique vantage point into, and they would charge a ton of money to give their own clients situational understanding about other of their clients. And it starts to really quickly move into an ethical gray area, because they're not providing my specific data, but I contribute to this generalized data that they're now monetizing. What other kinds of like patterns, whether concerning or interesting, have you encountered when it comes to data monetization that maybe didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago that you're starting to see nowadays?
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, with the advent of this type of on-demand machine learning, where doing exactly that, what you just explained is actually kind of the bread and butter of pharmaceutical, because we don't have that data, right? So we need to make assumptions, statistical assumptions,
Mm-hmm.
as to who is actually promoting our products and who is not promoting our products, so that we can offer training to those that are not promoting our drug. Maybe they are not aware. So that type of analysis, statistical analysis in the blind, if you will, has made it has been made quite easy. I shouldn't say easier, but at least accessible
Mm-hmm.
to those that can now stand up machine learning automation in the different cloud providers, for example, to start analyzing data and doing that type of data analysis in such a way that they can now identify patterns, which before were just assumed they would never be found, or at least accessible to those business, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second piece of it, where I see there's a brand new business, is everybody's starting, if they're getting into the software side of things and collecting data on behalf of users or using APIs, the first thing is, it's almost like we're all kind of trying to look for that magic thing. We say, oh my, I can connect to this API. This is great. I can web scrape the entire internet, and just like Google did, can now put a search engine and sell this information back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people are no longer thinking about building a software that does a game or a tool or an activity reminder platform or something like that. Now they're thinking about what data can I collect through those applications that I can then resell and kind of be the master of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's half the power hungry kind of in us that kind of says, I'd like to control this.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the other piece, which is, I wonder if I can do it, right? There's those two sides, right? of the geekiness and the thing, oh yeah, I'll be controlling all this data. So there's those two things. And I think people are always thinking about that. We have a lot of customers that are using ClickData to report on it, also to collect data that they wish to kind of monetize off. And the question is, it's not necessarily a bad thing if it's done with the right type of data that is not private, that is not health sensitive, that is not that it meets all the legal check boxes. It has to be done with the right intention as well, to offer a better service, to offer potentially a better product.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be done with the right intentions and monetized in the right way, but not offered as as a free for all search social network, and all of a sudden one day you're cut off, right? It's like you get a little bit of the drug, but then we'll take it off, right? So it's a big minefield, and I think it's a gray area. And I think we have just seen last 3-4 years, I've seen a lot of legal battles on that ground, and I think we're going to see a lot more in the years to come.
Yeah, though that's fascinating stuff, and I actually want to turn the dial a little bit, kind of related to this topic that we've talking about. And I know this isn't your area of specific expertise, but I'm sure this is not the first time you're going to get a question on this particular topic areas, because like I love most of the time to spend time thinking about innovation and analytics and how do we start driving our businesses better and all of these things. But there's a flip side to all of this, which is the more data that we have, the more cloud and complexity that we have, and we're talking about APIs. And we're talking about, we talked about some privacy things. There's also this world that's becoming more and more visible, even to smaller businesses, which is around security and around, things like, where organizations are being hijacked and taken hostage and ransomware and all of these kinds of things become, the more connected we are and the more we're pulling from different data sources or whatever, the more we potentially expose ourselves and our networks to really big risk when it comes comes to people, not only, data breaches are just the start. It's literally where it could infiltrate and seize the operations of our organization from a data perspective and a systems perspective. What are the kinds of things that you're seeing from your vantage point in this space, and what do you think might be the right answers to help continue to drive this data? I don't think we're stopping data-driven behaviors, but how do we make sure we're putting them in a place where the risk is being managed in an effective way?
That's a tough question. That's a great question, Anthony. I'm not sure if I'd be able to answer that, but I do fear, as a software development company, that there's too many points of entry. And most of those points of entries are asked by our customers. They're features that they want, right? And I think there's two different types of points of entries that we need to define. There's the points of entry where, through acquisitions, and that's one of my biggest concerns, through acquisitions, company A buys technology from company B, either leases it or outright acquires it, and with it is saying, well, we integrate very, very tightly with this, without knowing what this is, and all the backdoors that it could potentially bring, right? So that's one of my concerns. And the second concern, and this is, I think it is definitely expanded today because companies like Microsoft, which used to be very closed ecosystems, have now opened up. I mean, they're doing stuff on Linux. They're doing stuff definitely on cloud, but containers, Dockers. They're partnering up with all these companies. They're contributing to open source projects. Linus, basically, Unix has become a very open but still open source operating system. All these things are great, but where's all this code coming from? Who's vetoing this, right? There's something to be said about that old mentality of making sure that nothing comes into my company that I don't know, I don't license it, I don't have somebody that I can say, okay, this is your code, this is your application. So that's one point of entry, is the application side. And that is usually concerning because, as with most software companies, we use Microsoft Azure as our cloud provider. And I'm counting on them to keep our customers' data safe, right? And whether they are or not is based on other third parties that audit them and so forth. On the data side, it's exactly the same thing. I think there's this huge liberty that we sometimes have to train our customers. Please don't send me, something as simple as, please don't send me your password. Please don't send me your Excel with all your finances on this email.
Yeah.
We built this platform so you can load it directly there. It's encrypted. Put it there. Don't send it to me on Excel and say, can you build a dashboard with this data? That's not how it works, right? Yeah. So there's an education as well, Anthony. I think we have been very open until recently to just opening, putting our Visa card on the net, by over the phone, giving numbers and licenses and IDs. We've had this trust as long as that little lock icon is at the top, that everything is safe. And that is obviously totally false. And I think you need to learn that the hard way sometimes, to kind of take a step back and kind of really put things together in your company and your personal life as well that secure your data, that secure your finances, that secure everything pretty much these days. So it's a learning thing. I think it's a generational thing. I think it's going to get better, but it'll take a lot of passes at it. And I also believe it's going to take a lot of old technology to kind of phase out as well before we can be safer, at least.
Yeah, no, that's some great actionable advice, and I think that the comment around too of like it's hard enough when we're in kind of a steady state, we're operating our business or what have you, but many of our businesses don't do that right now, especially we got the pandemic, we've got the merger and acquisition space just exponentially increases the complexity like every time instantly, and like those kinds of crucial business events, those aren't going to stop, but they haven't, they aren't usually done based on how well are these technologies going to mash up in the back office. Like that's just not how it is. So and we're almost out of time, and I think like minute by minute there have been so many great insights during this conversation. I think this is one of just the most action packed. Like we've covered a lot of ground, and I appreciate your flexibility as I've thrown some questions at you that you probably weren't
I
expecting.
love it.
But the last question that I have for you, and I'm really just interested in saying, especially for those small and medium sized businesses that find all of this just super overwhelming, like what are the one or two or three things that they could be doing that they're probably or maybe not doing that you often see, or like when they come to you, if they had been doing these things get a lot easier. What could they do themselves to start getting on the right path to getting where they should be with data and technology and cloud and analytics and all of these things? Where do you start?
Wow, that's a great question. But I mean, my advice at the beginning, which was always start with what is important to you to run your business, right? Really take a step back. Don't see what technology you have at your disposal. Don't look at the data that you have. Rather, think about what are those performance indicators that can make an impact, and then from there derive what you need, right? You may arrive at the end to say, well, I don't have the data for that, right? But I'll make an assumption, or I'll just assume something there to calculate that indicator or that chart or what have you. And don't just start building all kinds of KPIs just because you can. Everybody's great at building charts on Excel. I love it, but don't do that. Just focus on what you really want, what you want to see every Monday morning. You open your iPhone or whatever, and you look at it and you kind of go, okay, I'm doing well. I did well yesterday. My sales was, I mean, that's the point of time that I wanted to get, and I have right now with ClickData, that I can see what my team did yesterday in different areas and kind of see, yeah, I gotta call this person here because there's something not right, or why did we do this or that. So think from a KPI standpoint and then build it down. The second thing is that even if you don't need tools, expensive tools, to do what potentially Excel can do very well. I think the second thing is to get yourself educated in terms of the way to format data. Excel is an amazing tool, again, as other tools, but I think people confuse visualization with the data side. One of the things that our customers come to us often is, oh, I've built this amazing Excel with macros and everything else, pivoted tables all over the place. Can you load that up, right? But we know that pivoted data is static, right? It's columnar. It's not ideal for consumption and analysis. Terms such as normalized data don't really are terms that are a bit more difficult to explain. Mm-hmm. But the concept of saying, well, have you thought of just shifting that around and saying every day you have a new sale, just write a new line at the end. So you build what we call it a table, a normal vertical table. And the basics of that, I think, is very important. And I think it's because of the flexibility of such tools that allow them to enter data and at the same time visualize it at the same time, mm-hmm. which is great, but it's not sustainable. So they need to start thinking more in terms of proper data formatting and standards in terms of how they need to track their business as it grows. It may be okay to do a pivot table if you have only a few orders a day. It will run unmanageable if you have hundreds of orders a day. And the third piece is the visualization. I recommend often to customers to look at things such as Stephen Few's blog. Tufte's principles may be a little bit too, but these guys teach you that a pie chart is a pain is very hard to read. Mm-hmm. Pie charts are not ideal. Maybe column charts. And whether you agree with it or not, at least learn the basics of visualizations. Don't build a dashboard that has 50 indicators. 50 indicators is a sure sign that your users, your employees, your partners will not look at that dashboard. They will look at 3 or 4 the most, and they have to be precise. They have to be well visualized. And if they want to dig deeper, then build another view for that. But don't try to overload your visualization with a lot of things. So these are very basic but more educational, pedagogical approaches to how you should handle your data, how you should look at your data, and nothing to do with tools. You can do this with any tool you want, by the way. So these are the advices that we give most often to any small business starting to get larger and they're starting to have difficulties handling their data. Those three things usually help along the way.
Telmo, that's amazing advice. I mean, it's just and I think that notion of simple metrics, make it clear, make it actionable. Don't go too complex. Start with the basics. Know what you need every day. Like those are just core things that are easy to forget in a very complex and getting increasingly so complex world. And so thank you for that. I'm sure that is going to help a lot of people out there. And
I hope so.
You know, and we're definitely out of time now. So Telmo, thank you so much for being here today. This has been an awesome, fun show. So thank you very much. And thank you for watching or listening today. You'll find links and more information about today's topic in the show notes. Visit Algman.com to learn more about Algman data leadership and the many ways we can help you become a data leader. Stay safe during these unusual times and go make an impact.